The word that I keep coming back to is uplifting. I have this conviction based on my lived experience that uplifting people or the planet doesn't have to be draining. It can actually feel uplifting to the person who's making that impact.
Welcome to another episode of Uplifting Conversations. Today, I am delighted to have a conversation with Jon Carter from Prado and Noramay Cadena from Supply Chain Capital. And before we get started, I will disclaim that some of the folks on our podcast, we do have investments with Supply Chain is a proud portfolio fund of ours. And so by extension, also we are indirectly invested in Prado. Also, we will unpack the work of both of them and the remarkable things that they're doing. I poke around and look at bios before I start these. I've gotten to know Noramay very well and got to know Jon a little bit better in preparation. And I'm sure everyone will be as blown away as I am and have been by Noramay. So Jon, a fellow Bruin, and you have had a myriad of experiences, both kind of diverse experiences within the food space, as an investor, as an entrepreneur and a company builder, and even prior to that, a really interesting background in the entertainment space and the financial space. Can you talk, and so as another person with a very jagged path, I've found that when you find that thing that is most aligned with you, somehow you're able to look back and see different things all along the way that sort of weave together to become the perfect path, albeit not a straight one for where you are now. Can you talk a little bit about how some of that diverse experience in your past has brought you here, and maybe just kind of touch on each of those points a little bit to paint that picture for folks?
Yeah, sure. And thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to hit you with the most compound questions in the world. First, why don't you talk about Prado and what you're doing now and what it is and what it does for the world?
Yeah, first, thank you for having me and letting me share my story with your audience. And I think just to simply explain what Prado is, we see ourselves as digital infrastructure. So we're a SaaS solution specifically for subscription food businesses. And we believe, and the reason why I started this company is that we support an operating model in food service that is more sustainable and is aligned with a lot of the brands that are trying to help people with chronic disease and solve for food access. And I think the ability to do that is fundamentally first about having a profitable approach to digital food service. So that's why we've built Prado to be that digital infrastructure
was the belief underneath that digital food service was going to become more decentralized and would need kind of a supporting hub or an engine, and that was the opportunity?
Yeah, and I think to kind of get to your first question about like the through line in my own experience in my career leading up to this point, I have, as you said, I got my start in financial services and then kicked around in entertainment and now in food. And I think the common thread there is that I saw large scale tech disruption happen in three separate consumer verticals. And when I got started in food in Austin here with a company called Snap Kitchen, I had no prior exposure to food service operations, logistics, supply chain. And what I was blown away by was, at that time, at least Snap Kitchen had a different approach relative to kind of your made to order, which is the dominant form factor I think most people are familiar with, particularly around digital food, is made to order and the unit economics of that and the relative waste of that versus something that's batch produced ahead of time where you're having future orders against that food. And so I think seeing that was a superior approach and a better business, but also the fact that it was helping people with some of these lifestyle conditions that need curated food service and making that more possible in the world at the end of the day and trying to provide a solution that lowered the barrier to entry for more brands to participate. And what I saw is a boom in an inflection point and innovation on food service.
So you were at Snap. You're also an advisor to Every Table, right? And did
That's
that
right.
have any influence on, or does that have any intersection with your work at Prado?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what we're trying to do effectively is help businesses like Every Table to do their best work in the world as in providing them digital infrastructure. So, and Snap now is a customer that is in the early phases of launching on our platform. So, our goal is to help more brands like that exist. And in fact, we launched another one called Epicured that focuses on people that have various gut health issues like IBS and Crohn's. And you'd be surprised at how many of these chronic diseases are out there and businesses that are trying to help people. And one of the things that they need to solve for is technology, and that's where we come in.
Mm. So Noramay, I always forget, you're so cool. I always forget how much of a brainiac you are, and Shayna is. I don't think I appreciated you had an MBA and a master's in engineering from MIT, and you did your undergrad at MIT, and you have all this amazing experience as an investor and kind of this operations savant. Why is it that you decided to build a venture capital firm to support entrepreneurs like Jon, and talk a little bit about supply chains more broadly?
Yeah, happy to. I'll tell you a little bit about the journey that my business partner Shayna and I have been on over the last 20 years. She's been in the food ecosystem her entire life. I mean, her entire work life. From the nonprofit sector, working for Oxfam and really understanding farmers and supply chains, to the corporate sector, working for Mars and helping them define their sustainable sourcing practices, and then being part of a venture-backed company and helping the company grow and scale. And on my end, I come at this from a slightly different background, right? I studied engineering, went to work in the aerospace sector, where I spent 12 years working on large scale product development and integration. I worked on satellites and airplanes and other space vehicles. And we met in business school and continued our respective careers, but maintained a friendship and respect for each other. And in 2020, what really brought us back was that we were both at inflection points. She had left her venture-backed company. I had just finished deploying a proof of concept deep tech fund, and we were looking for more purpose and more value. Right, this was mid 2020, when we all had a bit of a reflective period. We reached out. I reached out to her to learn more about food. She coincidentally wanted to learn more about venture. And we started introducing each other to our networks. And what happened organically was that we made an angel investment in a food company. And as we talked about why this company was exciting and why it needed to exist, we started to unfold the thesis that our venture capital firm is now pursuing, which is that there are two big forces impacting the future of many industries, but food in particular, and those are climate and culture. So both demand side and supply side forces. This is a $10 trillion industry. 10% of the world is employed in food and ag. It contributes over a third of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is an area that needs technology desperately. And we thought that we were at this, pretty interesting nexus and lens together, and that we complemented each other. And our firm was born in late 2020, really with a mission to invest at the intersection of food, culture, and technology to build the kind of ecosystem we want to see.
And I'll have you toot your horn a little bit here about how well you guys have measured and managed impact as a VC fund. I think I sent an email when I got the last impact report that said, "I heart your your impact," because one of the things we aspire to do is to share best practices and to educate other portfolio funds of ours.
Yeah.
On how they can not only measure and manage, which is a huge part of the job, but also how they can communicate impact in a way that engages and is emotionally resonant and is felt by the investors. I think that's part of the work, is helping people do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys have thought through impact thesis and impact engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of how we run the firm, right? So when we invest, we're certainly looking for returns. We are a returns first fund, but we also look for impact, and we really believe that they go hand in hand. You can't invest in the food ecosystem and not think about impact. And so every investment we make is either reducing the food system impact on climate, it is improving health in our communities, or it is improving diversity across the food and ag ecosystem. And so it means that we literally have a pre-screener with questions, yes or no, about a deal, and it's that the points have to add up, and you have to get a binary pass or fail. And so beyond the financial attractiveness of a deal, it's got to be impactful in one of the ways that we've deemed um, essential. And so as we step back now, we produced our first impact report, as you mentioned earlier this year. We surveyed companies through 2022, and our metrics we're pretty amazing. 80% of the companies that we've invested in are led by either women or people of color. In terms of healthier communities and reducing the impact on climate, the numbers are in the 70%, and that trend has continued through our investments in 2023.
Mhm. So I'll ask both of you about this, because one of the things that we try to impress upon LPs, potential LPs, and kind of that the wealth management space that we look to in general is this idea that impact and inclusive investing are not concessionary. And even going beyond kind of battling against the negative, we talk about the opportunity for alpha in some of these impact themes, and also the opportunity for alpha that's available in investing in overlooked founders by gender, overlooked founders by race. And so, Noramay, I'll ask you first, kind of, how do you think about even looking for advantage in some of your impact themes? And then, yeah, I'll ask that first, and then I have a related question for you, Jon.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Latina in VC, right? When I started in venture capital in 2015, I could count the number of Latina partners on maybe one hand plus. 8 years later, there's been a lot of incredible work by organizations like Latinx VC or Somos VC and Black VC and others that have really impacted the ecosystem. And so the number has probably, doubled, maybe on the verge of tripling, but
Start
there's
stepping on
still
some toes in your counting.
totally. I need a friend to let me hold their hands. So the numbers grown, but as we go out into the ecosystem, there are folks who have gotten so many no's, and they come and we are their first yes. And that's incredible, because when we see the opportunity that they see, because we've lived it, right? And I'll give you an example on the culture side, on the brand side. We're investors in IO Foods, which is a West African national food platform, and in Agua Bonita, which is a California Central Valley company repurposing fruit into agua fresca, which is a staple in the Latino community. I grew up drinking agua fresca. I know how key and critical it is. You go to any Mexican restaurant, you're going to have agua fresca. And so because I've lived that experience, and I know we know the population demographic shift that's occurring in this country and will take place over the next 20 years. We can see that future. So we know there's an opportunity for buy-in for the community leverage, but there's also an incredible opportunity for transitioning to mass market appeal. So that's only on the culture side, right? Not even thinking through technology and platform and marketplaces, but that's one small example of how, alpha can really be found if you truly understand the market from populations that have been so grossly underrepresented, and whose visions and whose opportunities have not had the chance to really flourish.
Absolutely. So, Jon, similar question. Like, entrepreneurship is hard. Like starting something from the idea phase and convincing the world that thing is a thing. is hard. It is really hard as a founder of color. And so I wonder, are there places where, I'm sure there's plenty of places where things are exponentially hard. Are there places where you've been able to draw strength based on your background, not just career-wise, but your cultural background and your background as an entrepreneur of color?
Yeah, I think, my driving force for doing what I'm doing really comes back to the story, my own family story, and my father, who I lost to diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And that really keeps me driven about what I'm trying to do. And ultimately, we see ourselves having an impact for sure on the waste rooted in food service, the way it exists today, status quo, but also in encouraging a lot of these brands who are supporting food as medicine as a movement. And so I think when I think about the good that we're trying to do in the world, and I think about the impact we're trying to have, that's the thing that when you have those dark days, and there are many, and you are right, it is difficult, but I come back and draw strength on the thing I'm trying to do. And the fact that, where we are today, just in the US, you've got 96 million people with prediabetes. And as Noramay said, about a third of greenhouse gas emissions rooted in a food system. I think that I see this as an urgent matter. And so I think that, when I think about what we're doing, when you have those difficult times, I think feeling like you're a part of something that at the end of the day is going to have impact on millions of people's lives gets you through. And I think it's bigger than me. And I think that that's the important thing to remember. And as an entrepreneur of color, I think also, what I take very seriously is that, we don't get a lot of opportunity. So you have an extra incentive to have a successful precedent here. And I think a lot of the founders I speak to who look like me feel the same way, that you have to push even harder because the stakes are very high, and we want to set a positive precedent so the next entrepreneur that follows behind me has the same opportunity.
Yeah, and I find that sense of responsibility and like the appreciation of the opportunity definitely is a common thread for a lot of entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs that I have encountered. No, and like that supports what I believe, which is you hit on the lived experience, you hit on having sort of this deeper well, which is everything, right? And the staying power in entrepreneurship is everything. And so that's incredible. But you touched on kind of the personal pain point, or one of the personal pain points, or places where there was some darkness and something that you felt should not be the way it was, in terms of your family and your dad's background. What gave you hope that you could be part of the solution, and that what you were building could be something that changed things for the better?
I saw it when I came here to Austin, and I had no exposure to the businesses or type of businesses that we now are trying to help succeed. I did not realize how much good you could do with just what is a simple kind of business service. At the end of the day, it's just curated food service. And when I would read the comments and the letters from customers of Snap Kitchen back then about how big of an impact that this was having on their lives, as a brand at the time, that felt awesome, and that was something that galvanized us as a team. But it impressed upon me, at least, that there's a path here, there's hope here, and how do I take this and amplify the reach of it to the rest of the market and the different communities, like the community I grew up in. And that's what really gave me hope, is that I found something that I felt like had a reason for being, that had real impact, tangible impact, that I saw for myself. And I wanted to figure out how I could amplify it. And I think back to your question about the through line, having seen that in other consumer verticals, I knew what technology could do at scale. So it was a question of, how do I apply it to this problem?
That's so, and you looked around and like examined like what was the starting point. So how, I think we talk about this concept of stretching resources versus chasing resources, and a lot of time people see a big problem, they see a big opportunity, but then they take inventory of all the things they need to start. Right? Oh, and then if I had this, and if I had that, and if I had this, maybe I could start at that problem. What gave you the belief that you had in front of you every resource that you needed? Maybe that's just a network, but every resource that you needed to start to act upon this problem. And I guess what were the resources that you started with?
Yeah. So I mean, I was the CEO of Snap. So as an operator, I kind of saw this problem that we're now solving firsthand, and we attempted to solve it ourselves at the time with the resources we had. And it turns out that wasn't a sustainable path for us, and it's not a sustainable path for the rest of the industry. So I kind of had confirmation on at least 30,000 feet that, you know, this was the approach that made sense for the market. And then with my specific experience, I was able to, with my co-founder, figure out how to bootstrap our way to a prototype. And with that, we partnered with Everytable and we got to market. And from there, you know, we've been iterating ever since. So I think, you know, the combination of the experience, relationships, the motivation, and then the opening in the market came together to make for a chance for us to do this. But I'd say it was really just having, you know, my co-founder and I and that exposure were really the only resources we had at the time to get started.
Very cool. And Noramay, similar for you, like what were you and Shayna sitting around and like kind of poking around and trading ideas, and you make that first angel investment? How do you go from that to, I think we can build something that truly impacts the future of food for the better, making it more sustainable, more culturally aware? Like how did you guys find energy for that vision?
Yeah, we wake up with energy for this vision. But really, I had spent 5 years building out another small firm, and so I had been I'd been the founder of a micro VC firm and had done the back office, had done the fundraising, had invested and supported entrepreneurs, and so I knew that we could build the firm. And then on her end, she was so deeply embedded within the food ecosystem that, you know, she had relationships with investors from her days on the founder side. And she had been advising a few companies at various levels, early stage, Series A and plus. And so we knew we had the value. One of the other things we did beyond the angel investment and the conversation, sort of checking each other out around values and work ethic and teaming buy-in and all that stuff, was we also created a little Venn diagram of who's in this ecosystem, like who's doing this work, who's investing in food, who's investing in food tech, and who is thinking about culture, right? Who's thinking about diversity, and where are those intersections? And we found that they intersected seldomly. And so we thought, here's our opportunity, right? We're looking at food and ag from this very different lens. And so we do think there's a gap in the market. And we put a very ugly deck together and started to socialize it. And we got our first LP commitment. So I think that was the initial fire that said we were onto something. But certainly it started with lots of conversations, work around the teaming relationship, and then really validating that there was a gap that we could fill.
And if there's other folks who maybe just from a micro investment standpoint, or angels, or other folks who feel like there are issues in the world that need to be solved, and capital may be a resource for that, how would you suggest they get started investing?
Yeah, I think certainly doing something before building out a firm is important, right? Whether it's joining a platform like Portfolio, right, which has micro funds that you can then be part of many investments, but you can dial in and watch the pitch calls and hear people deliberate. So I think the experience of evaluating a deal and trying to determine feasibility, market risk, exit outcomes, the landscape. That's a muscle that you really have to build up over time. And so I wouldn't recommend anyone go from zero investment experience to building out a firm. I think we had, close to 75 investments between us when we started our firm. So it definitely it takes some time to learn how to do that and to do it to a point where it's comfortable and not really, really scary. So yeah, I would recommend either
And
angel
you touched
investing,
on your
scout.
prior, you touched on your prior infrastructure building experience
Yeah,
at your prior, and like that is no small portion of operating a
yeah,
VC firm. If it was just investing, that would be
totally. I mean, we built out this firm on top of 20 years of doing other things, including investing in early stage companies. So I would recommend the scout work, the angel work, joining a platform that allows you to have a front row seat into what it takes, and certainly any kind of opportunity to be part of a small team building out a firm, because it takes a lot of work to build out a firm, right? And to invest plus raise capital, invest plus try to be supportive of your portfolio, invest plus, have post investment infrastructure for support. So it really takes a lot.
John, how would you recommend folks, the entrepreneur out there, a potential entrepreneur out there who wants to start the next company that's going to change the world in food space or otherwise, start at that? We call them micro acts of courage.
I think one of the things that I would recommend any aspiring entrepreneur do is talk to some other founders, talk to some people in the fire who are doing what you believe you want to do, and make sure that you have a well-rounded, realistic perspective on what you're about to start and embark on. Because I think, no matter how experienced you are, you cannot anticipate how difficult and hard this stuff is. And so I think that, it's exciting to start a company. And I think that it's awesome when people do it. It's something that you should seriously think about on multiple levels, because it takes a toll. So that'd be the main thing, is talk to other founders, other entrepreneurs that are doing it before you really jump in. And then I think that, thankfully, there are a lot more resources, particularly, in the VC landscape now than there were, even a couple of years ago. So I think that there's a lot more out there and a lot more support for entrepreneurs of color in particular. But we have a long way to go. And so ever more important to really do your diligence up front and make sure that you're buttoned up on what you're trying to accomplish.
Very cool. And that's a nice dovetail into, what I think will be the final question, my favorite question. What does uplifting mean to each of you? You can start with you, John. What does uplifting mean to you?
I think it comes back to impact. I truly am invested in having an impact in the world and having that impact be tangible. So for me, it's thinking about, the number of lives that we impact through the merchants that we support, in terms of impacting chronic disease outcomes. But in addition to that, lowering food waste, and to the extent we're successful, what amount of food waste can we impact at scale? And what does that fundamentally mean for all of us? And so I think that, being very specific about that and being in a place to quantify that impact, to me, is important. And so that's what I, when I think about uplifting, I think about, how do I measure my ability to do that, and how big can that impact be?
Very cool. And agreed. Right. What does uplifting mean to you?
Oh my gosh, it means a few things. I think personally and professionally, right? I think it means that we're not afraid to go first. It means that we do work in community and we do things what we call the supply chain way, which means we take from, from our experiences through today, but then we determine what's the best way for us together as a team, given the current dynamics and what we know now, right? So we're not doing things as they've always been done. We're not doing things as we've done in the past, but we're really looking for the new supply chain way, which is an amazing way to think about just really building in what we've lived and learned. And I think that personally, what I'm learning more and more is that, this work that we do is urgent. It is essential. It takes, it's brain and heart loaded, but it's also really exhausting. And so more and more we're really thinking and talking, amongst ourselves around how do we restore, right? How do we restore at the end of a really long week, at the end of a really long quarter? Because we need to, wake up with the energy. So I think we need to think about ourselves as uplifters in a way that really preserves that balance. I have a young son. Shayna has young kids, and we want to be uplifting in the work that we do, but we also want to be uplifting at home.
Yeah.
So that's been top of mind.
That is that so resonates. Like normalizing this truth that doing uplifting work can and should feel uplifting to the person who's engaging in that work. Like that's the most sustainable form of doing uplifting work. That is incredible. Completely agree. You, Jon, you, Noramay, are certainly uplifting to me. I appreciate the both of you taking the time here to share your wisdom, share your journeys, and I'm sure a ton of folks will get a lot of value out of this. Deeply appreciate it.
Please be sure to subscribe, like, and click the notification button so you never miss an episode.